Welcome to the Swedish version of Procurement Says No, episode 33.
Well done, you've just alienated our Swedish listener.
Well, that's okay, because today we have a recording that was made a couple of weeks ago with Kodiak Hub on their podcast, which is called The Way We Source, which is run by Sam Jenks. So we met Sam and he talked to us all about Procurement Says No and what we do. And we talked about agile stuff, and we talked about tariffs, and we talked about AI, and we talked about procurement people taking themselves a little bit too seriously.
But not in Stockholm.
Not in Stockholm, no.
So here he is.
And listen to the lovely music as well. And stay till the end to listen to the lovely music at the end as well.
Named after a Kodiak bear.
My name is Sam Jenks, and welcome to another episode of The Way We Source, a podcast hosted by Kodiak Hub, where we share our talks with procurement practitioners, leaders, experts, consultants, content gurus, and people that we find downright inspiring. Diving into the role that sourcing and procurement plays in the way we live. If you like today's episode, make sure to rate the program and give us a follow. Today's guests are the dynamic duo behind Odesma and the hit podcast Procurement Says No. With decades of combined experience in procurement transformation, cost reduction, and supply chain strategy, they've advised some of the world's largest organizations across sectors like aerospace, automotive, defense, and financial services. These advisors to procurement pros are known for bringing their blend of sharp strategic thinking with a little bit of humor, helping teams cut through complexity and all the hype. Together, they're challenging conventional wisdom in procurement with equal parts insight in irreverence. They bring a no-nonsense, high-impact view of where procurement is headed and what needs to change to get there. Please welcome to the show the duo from Procurement Says No, Ed Cross and Richard Beattie. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you for having us, Sam. And that was the best introduction that we've ever had. So we'll steal that in future. So you've done your homework.
Rich usually does the intros, and yours are much better, Sam. So,
Well, thank you to a blend of ChatGPT and a little bit of copywriting skills that I'll have to thank my 11th grade English teacher for, because I don't know if I've had such a good teacher since. Let's get into things right away. Procurement Says No. What's your guys' philosophy? And let me ask you this. What are you guys saying no to?
Well, everything. I'll say this one. Everything, Sam. I mean, we started off the podcast because there were just too many people, these so-called gurus, spouting off about procurement and taking it all just too seriously. So especially is it procurement or is it purchasing or is it buying? It's shopping with other people's money, isn't it? Let's be honest. So, but hey, we think procurement is fun, and we think procurement people can be fun sometimes. So it's a reaction to that, really. Procurement is a strategic function. Well, not as much as marketing or product design or finance or operations or sales. It's maybe beats HR, but it can support strategy, but it's not strategy in itself. So it was that kicked it off. So our philosophy is no to everything.
Okay, understood. Ed, how do you echo the no, so to say, in your experience?
No.
Too many people take themselves too seriously, don't they, in business? And too many people in procurement take themselves too seriously, I think. So it's just a cynical view of the function. That's what Procurement Says No is, isn't it, Rich? I think it's just, we've been around the block, heard and seen lots of people, lots of gurus, lots of consultants, all taking themselves very seriously. And we get to a certain age where we don't care anymore.
But nuggets of priceless insight, you have to remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. Priceless insights and a bit of irreverence. Now, let's dig into this really quickly. Why do procurement professionals take themselves so seriously? Is it the nature of the role? You're there to be able to manage risk and cut costs, and you need to be able to be firm on suppliers. Does this play into the procurement mode of operating and why you or many others may kind of view procurement professionals as the ones that are quote unquote too serious?
I think for some people because some people will see it as power, won't they? I have power across my suppliers, so I shall beat them mercilessly. And I think that's part of it. They have this sort of weird, sort of narcissistic thing. There's not many people that do that, but that might be part of it, possibly. And the other ones might be going, if I'm good at procurement, I will one day be on the board, because all procurement people get to be on the board of FTSE 100 or Fortune 500 companies. All of them do, except for Tim Cook. Oh, no, sorry, the other way around. Tim Cook is the only procurement person ever to get onto the board.
And he wasn't actually exactly a procurement person. He was a supply chain person.
Oh,
because I checked that.
Good enough.
Yeah, so much for your argument, sir. Right, so procurement people, they're in a really funny position, aren't they? Okay, so they might have gone to university and done a degree that somehow has some bearing on procurement, but generally not. And a lot of people fall into procurement. Okay, they go and do a business degree, whatever, commercial orientated degree generally, and then they fall into a procurement role. And there isn't really a strong positive view of procurement within most businesses, because they feel that procurement interferes. So you've got a little bit of a chip on your shoulder about the organisation and the way they perceive you and your background, because you're not a lawyer. You've done a law degree and then you've done some other stuff, and you've got special letters after your name and all that. Or you're an accountant and you have to regularly prove that you're still an accountant, okay, to remain an accredited accountant. Procurement people don't really have that, but what they do have is massive power with suppliers, and the suppliers have to kowtow to them. They have to bow and scrape and all that sort of stuff, and get a bit of a beating from the procurement person, whether it's through negotiations or bollockings about things that haven't happened, deliveries haven't happened, etc., etc. So I think that procurement people find themselves in a funny position because of that, because they're seen not as a main player in the business, but sort of functionally, if you like, in the outside world, they've got loads and loads of power. So I think there's a bit of a dichotomy there. Come on, Rich.
I was going to introduce the old Kraljic matrix, because we have to mention that several times in every podcast. And, it's back to the Kraljic matrix, bottleneck suppliers. So that's why buyers hate bottleneck suppliers, don't they? Because they don't have the power. When the power shifts, they're not happy anymore. Us procurement folks, we don't like it.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting dichotomy here to be had. Internally, maybe the business function or the broader business doesn't see the function as the one wielding power, whereas externally, you have to almost exercise your power to be able to be effective. Or some may think that that's the case, or maybe abuse that particular power. But I'm curious on something that you guys said. You said there, because you've both been practitioners once upon a time, and you mentioned that procurement can be seen by the business of being maybe a blocker or a barrier to entry, something that is like more policing rather than supporting or working in a synergy, towards a common goal. How do we reposition procurement? I mean, how does the procurement function make themselves helpful rather than a hinder?
Brush the chip off its shoulder first.
Yeah,
not a bad first start.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot about communication, isn't there? Because there's, all the stuff about risk that, your friendly procurement person will have tried to help you with in terms of getting a supply chain that is not risky or less risky, and getting the contracts in place. And I think a lot of it's about the communication. What we're doing is we're trying to ensure that you get your parts or services because we've put the right contracts in place with the right suppliers from the right places. And those steps in the process have to be done in order to avoid chaos in the event that something goes wrong. So I think there's part of that, and that requires being proactive, I guess. And a lot of the time, goods and services, I need it today, I need it yesterday. And therefore it's seen as a blocker because, actually we've got all these checks and balances that we need to do now. And these are going to take at least 3 weeks. So that's part of the problem.
If I think back to the beginning of my career,
that was
when I first worked in a long time ago. The screen goes all misty at this point.
It was in black and white as well, wasn't it, your career to start with? It wasn't even the talkie, was it?
Enough. When I was in my early days at ICL as an electronics buyer, which is where I started as a graduate, we talked about procurement marketing. That's the internal act of marketing procurement to stakeholders within the business.
Right.
Okay. So we were very service orientated. We're going through that whole Crosby quality stuff back in the day. This is the late 80s. And it was all about looking after your internal customers in other functions. What most procurement functions don't do very well, I think, is go and engage with their internal customers within the business and sell them the picture, the vision of procurement. And this is how I can help you. What are you going to buy in the future? Can I set up, contracts now in readiness for that future environment so that I'm not slow? Instead, what they get is the customer doesn't get that internally, or a stakeholder internally doesn't get that. What they get is, oh my Lord, why didn't you tell me about this before? You need that. Oh, I need to I need to get approval from finance. I need to get budget, or you need to get budget, etc. So I think what procurement needs to do differently is engage effectively with its internal stakeholders. And I know that sounds really boring, really glib, but that's what most functions have to do, don't they? I don't think most of the procurement functions I've seen do that particularly well. It's on the intranet. You want to buy something, Sam? Oh, yeah, there's a list of buyers' names on the intranet. But if you're a stakeholder internally, you don't know that your thing that you're going to buy is called MRO. So you don't even know who the buyer is, and you don't know the intranet exists for procurement. So it's really about the effectiveness of communicating with internal stakeholder groups. I think that's the bit that procurement should do better.
We're from central procurement and we're here to help.
How often is it that we allow the process of procurement, right, to become the barrier to entry? Because I think that there is an aspect here of that. If procurement engages themselves early, excellent. Everybody can be able to understand the value of the procurement function. And I think that the true value can be understood when they are able to see savings, or a reduction on lead time, or improvements in quality, the things that procurement can be able to improve upon or kind of tune up the dial on. I guess then the question is, do we let the process get in the way of the actual act of buying and the act of being able to deliver value to the business? Because procurement is very process oriented, and in a lot of ways has to be in certain businesses, particularly in highly regulated businesses. How do we avoid letting the process get in the way, right? And I mean, it can't just be engage stakeholders early. I mean, there has to be another way.
I think when you get into public procurement, you say the process takes over, and people think about the process more than they do the outputs, and that's part of the problem. In private sector, I think you go back to the stakeholder management and business partnering and all that kind of stuff, and making sure that you're bringing your stakeholders along for the ride all the time, and that you're involved in their discussions, so that by default you're involved early in the discussion, rather than then coming, oh, we've got this idea, and then coming to you. I think having procurement in the room is the way forward on that one.
Yeah, I'd also add to that, I think it's about enablement, isn't it? So if you've got a really proactive procurement function, they've got agreements in place with suppliers. Okay, They've got some sort of price list, whatever, or structure for working out what the should cost will be. There's something probably around technology as well, isn't there, about having sort of self-service solutions, whether it's something as simple for low-value procurement like, Amazon Business or something set up so lots of users can use it. So maybe for procurement to make it really work is they've got to be sort of mechanics for the process and the buyer of the car. So they buy the vehicle for buying stuff, some technology or whatever that's sort of self-service. And then they enable or they tune the car to make sure that it works for your particular environment. So they layer different technology solutions in place, or different supplier solutions in place for the user to take up. Again, that sort of doesn't generally happen. And then the challenge for procurement or supply chain is that then they don't get the money to buy the technology that they really need to make it happen, because there's other priorities on the corporate agenda. So I think there's a sort of bit of a game to be played strategically for procurement to think about what is it we need to do to help people who want to buy stuff in our particular environment. And again, I think that my feeling is a lot of the time somebody goes forward from procurement and says, I want the big shiny technology solution. Well, nobody's going to invest in that, because the priorities of the business are innovation or customer service or bigger picture stuff. So I think it's about enablement for me, Sam, by procurement and seeing how they can make the environment better for the user.
There's a pretty shocking statistic that Gartner came out with back in tail end of 2024 that of the technologies that a procurement team looks to buy, the procurement team gets only 17% of those tech solutions, meaning they go with 10 different things that they want to buy in a year, they get 2 of them, at most, right? Now, I could ask you guys why, but I'd like to actually just shift gears into the topic of AI. You're not allowed to have a podcast episode today without talking about it, because obviously AI and technology or solutions that we're applying will soon become anonymous. I think that right now this is stolen from Yamini, who's the CEO at HubSpot. I was listening to her in a podcast. Certain applications of AI is neat, but soon it's going to be necessity, right? So I think it's going to be all one and the same. It's not going to be the AI strategy and the technology strategy. They're going to converge, right? And they already are, I think, in a lot of ways. I'm curious to hear from you guys' side, where have you actually already seen AI work? And also, where do you think that it's also being wrongly applied and misunderstood? So two sides of that same coin.
Well, firstly, I mean, your introduction was good, wasn't it? We've started writing blogs for Procurement Says No. We've got our website is up and running. We've written a series of them. We've published just one so far. And we've used AI 2 times actually to create those. So we create our parameters, we put it into chat. We're actually using Copilot and ChatGPT. We just for the larks. We're going to use both of them. So we put the parameters into ChatGPT to get a general gist of what the topics are going to be. That spills its output. I then draft something based upon that, putting some shits and giggles into it, and give it the style, and then feed that into Copilot and say, that's the style that we want, and here's the other outputs of ChatGPT. And it comes back with something which is 70% pretty good. And, then we tweak it a bit more. But I mean, that's, we did this, what was it? We've been doing the podcast for about 2 years, and we tried to do this. Must have been 18 months ago. We had a go, and it was crap. The output was absolute rubbish. So the fact that it is now pretty good shows how things have come on, and that just simple things like that have come on. The free use of AI. That's made a big difference. So that's just an example that we're using. But we used it in my last business for tender writing documentation. Again, this was about a year ago, and it wasn't very good. But it would give you. It was better than a blank sheet of paper. It would give you a starting point to kick off. And in those days, a year ago, it would give you 30-40% of a decent piece of work that you then had to tweak. It's now, as I say, it's now up to 70% as being pretty good. So it's getting better all the time, in my view. It's kind of like it's T300, I think, at the moment, isn't it? It'll get to T3000 soon, and then it'll probably be HAL 9000.
You're going to have to walk me through what that means. I have no idea what you mean by that.
Terminator and 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Okay.
Yeah, so
all right. Understood.
HAL being IBM.
Skip over the T1000. That was the silvery one. It'll just skip that.
Understood.
So we talk a lot about having to set fire to the sky in our podcast with regard to AI. And if you read, I was reading some press while I was on holiday talking about AI and as a sort of existential threat to us all. Well, I'll be dead by the time it becomes that. Yeah. Well, Richard, I've just published an article in a magazine called In Procurement. Okay, so 6 years ago, I wrote an article on AI, and I was the first person to write something in their magazine on that. And they asked me to do a sort of reprise on that. I wrote half the article with that ChatGPT. I wrote all the first half of it I wrote, and then I just got what are the themes for the future, took ChatGPT, as Rich said. However, right, it doesn't really sort of, what we're talking about is Google Plus with ChatGPT, aren't we? We want to do a bit of research and we want to pull a document together. We can sort of go on Google and do that. And Google's quite clever at doing it. It's also got its own AI thing as well as ChatGPT does, along with everybody else. But where it really matters, this is just sort of minor productivity stuff, isn't it? I'll put a tender together quicker. I'll put a scorecard for a tender together. I might build the basis of a contract, but that sort of stuff's been around for a while anyway. I ran a company called ShareMax in 2000, which was an e-sourcing company back in the day, first e-commerce wave. And it did that sort of stuff without AI, but it gave you the building blocks. You just tick boxes and said, I want that clause and I want that clause if you're looking at contracts, for example. Problem for me with AI is about active decision making and the prevalence of that. So you get a piece of AI and it looks into all your procurement activity and all procurement related activity and comes back to you and says, hey, Rich, your job for the next week is to work on this because this is the biggest opportunity. Or seeing tariff issues coming because there's a new administration and it looks and says, Donald Trump has always been about tariffs. He thinks it's a useful alternative to tax. It's a mantra that's been with him for 40 years if you read the press about it.
Okay.
But it can't do any of that yet. Or it can do it, but it's going to cost you $50 million to apply that application.
We were over in Vegas in March at ProcureCon Indirect, and we had we did a few podcasts over there, and one of our guests gave a good example of that sort of decision making versus giving information, and it was R2D2 versus C3PO. C3PO will tell you what to do, but he will do it in a very roundabout way, whereas R2D2 will just get on with it and cause chaos. And that's the sort of difference that we haven't quite seen that yet, I guess, in terms of agentic AI actually making the decisions, as you say, Sam. It's coming, I guess.
The other thing to think about is, where's a business going to put its money? So we were just talking at the outset about the role of procurement in the business and, how important it is or not, right? It's like the parable of the belly. All the bits are important, aren't they? The stomach's important, the brain's important, taste is important, etc. The challenge with AI in procurement is getting the money to invest. Because if I'm the CEO of a massive multinational and I'm thinking, say I'm a pharma company, I'm the big boss, I've got 5 things on my agenda, all relating to shareholder value and profits and, all that good stuff. And I'm thinking about my pharma business. Where's my AI money going to go? I tell you where it's going to go. It's going to
R&D, marketing.
R&D.
Yeah,
R&D in pharma, right? There's a
Yeah.
patent life of 21 years. I've got to get the product formulated, tested. That takes 10 or 11 years. I've got a 10-year life. How do I take it a month off that? Because I'm going to add $500 million of revenue. So the question is not just about whether AI works for procurement. It's whether AI will be invested in by the business in procurement. And it won't be in HR or finance or R&D or the customer, or productivity on the production line. Just being really serious for a minute, that's the issue. We all know AI is going to happen. Me and Rich have a view. It's not going to happen as quickly as everybody says. Just look at self-driving cars, how long that's taken to get. They're talking about now going to have self-driving cars, I think, in London next year. Seeing will be believing on my part, I think, because there's a whole host of things to think about, including legal stuff, like if the car crashes, whose fault is it? The driver, the pedestrian, the designer of the software, the car, who, how does that all work? All sorts of things like that to think about. But the reality, so I think it'll be slower generally, but slower in procurement because procurement's not top of the pile. So is it 10 years or is it 20? Loads of people talking about 5 to 10 years. I'm like, and we're jaundiced because we saw it with the first e-commerce wave. You weren't seeing it, Sam, but in the late 90s, I left Price Waterhouse to go and set up an e-sourcing platform provider, US-based company, and in Europe. And in the end, it went bankrupt. It wasn't the take-up. But there was a lot of high values on companies, a lot of this is all going to change everything. And the reality, it didn't. And I think AI, for me, is a bit the same. It's just going to take longer. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, because it definitely will, but it will just take a lot longer to be embedded than the commentators would suggest. Yeah, some of it's just budget.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think that's an issue that we have to be able to address, right? And that goes back to the exact potential foundational issue that procurement's experiencing internally with its stakeholders as well, right? Is being able to sell the value when it's all said and done. Now, you touched upon there an item surrounding Trump and tariffs. And I know that you guys had just published a blog on tariffs. I'm curious as to hear a little bit about what are your thoughts surrounding this kind of ever-changing landscape. It's very uncertain. It's the VUCA market, as everybody likes to talk about, right? Filled with volatility and uncertainty. How should a procurement team think in this era of geopolitics on the topic of tariffs particularly?
Well, we have a 5-point plan, Sam.
Let's hear it. And let me guess, it starts maybe with getting under the skin of Donald Trump, or getting into his mind.
No, we've got there's 2 things that you need to do. First of all, create some bullet points, and then secondly, crack on with them. The easiest thing is just to create the bullet points. So that's all we've done, and we're not going to crack on. We'll leave that to
Okay.
So the first thing you've got to do, bullet point number 1, is you've got to develop agile sourcing models, Sam. That's what you've got to do. Agile ones that are sourcing models. That's what you've got to do first. Secondly, you've got to strengthen your supplier due diligence, which I know you're not doing anything on at the moment. So that's bad. And you need to get on with that and go out there and be diligent. Thirdly, and Ed came up with this one because I don't understand what it means. You need to use tariff engineering strategies. Something to do with reclassification of components and country of origin analysis. Ask Ed. Fourthly, you've got to just get on and implement some advanced risk-based analytics to guide purchasing decisions. That's something you can just do, during your coffee break.
Like this. Yeah, sure.
I think a spreadsheet.
Click a button and it's done. Yeah, you bet.
And then fifthly, which isn't a word that you hear very often, fifthly, pay attention, as you say, because it's all going to change. I think, and they're the 5 procurement says no bullet points, which if you follow those to the point, you will fix everything and it won't be a problem.
Right.
But remember,
and I understand,
it's not black and white, it's orange.
Right. I understand that there's a glimmer in your eye when saying these things. I mean, my question, I guess, truly is like, jokes aside, I mean, what do we mean when we talk about agile sourcing? I mean, why has this suddenly become the talk of the town, as if the entire approach to sourcing and procurement is not to remain agile and have a supplier base that one can be able to depend upon and source in a I would say an interchangeable way with. I mean, why is it that all of a sudden everybody thinks that they have to get quote unquote agile? And what is it that we're lacking for agility?
Yeah. It's just a slide and a deck, really. But
I don't think it is.
To when Ed started in procurement 300 years ago, it was all about low cost country sourcing. It was offshoring. It was single sourcing. We put
as much money with a supplier as we possibly can. We make sure that we work on the margins. We're able to, have long-term relationship. They're going to be our main line of supply. We're going to be able to get the best price point from them by doing so. But I mean,
and part of that is great in the terms of the partnership stuff. But then there was this other bit, which was just rationalize. Fewer suppliers. Agile is kind of doing the opposite. It's having alternatives, having dual sourcing, having framework sourcing, having offshore and onshore, not putting all of your product supply, especially if it's eggs, in one low-cost offshore basket. So, and as I said earlier, no one is actually doing any due diligence. Everyone pretends they are, but they're not really. Yeah. And they may know who their next level, they'll know who their first tier supplier is. They might know a little bit about their second tier, but go any further than that, and nobody knows. And in fact, one business that I worked at once, and this was about 10 years ago. I was saying, well, we need to look, because they were sourcing stuff in China, and I was saying we need to look below the second or third tier. And I was actually told by one of the finance directors, "Oh no, I don't think you should do that. You might uncover something bad."
Well, I think the question is do companies even know how to look under the hood? Right? If they might be scared of what's there, but do they even know how to? Is then the second part of that question, right?
It's just the emperor's new clothes, isn't it? Agile sourcing. It just as you said, it looks good on a slide. It doesn't mean anything. It's just BS. Agile is nothing new, is it? So just in time started, or suggested to start in 1920s with the build of the Empire State Building. It's just a build on that. It's just sort of it's continuous improvement, or it's lean. It's just being flexible and fast moving, isn't it? But people like to put agile sourcing or agile against something they're doing to make it sound more current. But it's a buzzword.
How do you think that the pendulum has swung the other way, though, so drastically on the fact that everybody does want to diversify their lines of supply and, make sure that more so than
how? So if you've outsourced all your stuff to China, okay, how do you bring it back? Right? Have you got the money, the capital to set up a new factory to build? So I was on a webinar a couple of years ago about nearshoring, and a couple of professors talking. We've talked about this on our podcast, I think, and they were saying that about 90% of the brake assemblies for the automotive sector are made in China.
Right.
90% of the world's production. Just imagine how many cars are made in the world each year. I don't know, 200 million, 300 million, 500 million. How do you bring that back?
There's also things, the cost of doing it, the training, the workforce that you require. There's some things that we probably don't want to manufacture at home, do we? I mean, Trump's saying, bring everything back to America and there'll be no tariffs on it. But do they really want to produce everything at home? I don't know. Low cost, low tech stuff which doesn't give us a huge advantage in any way. Maybe other people can manufacture better in a global.
Well, I don't think it's not just that. It's just like, have you got the real estate? Have you got the space? Have you got the capital to invest? Have you got the knowledge to build brake assemblies? And these guys talking on this webinar said it would take at least 5 years to repatriate back on shore. Now, I went on holiday recently to the Far East and I saw some Foxconn factories in Vietnam. And I'm thinking, you think about that and then you have a bit of a smile to yourself, because there was some cartoons that the Chinese created. I don't know if you saw these, Sam, but it was a picture of a production line in the US making Apple iPhones.
Right. Yeah, I've seen some of these AI generated images. They were the talk of the town a few months ago. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So how would you do that? Is it possible to bring it back on shore? And I think that's a major challenge. But then just change tack slightly on the whole thing about tariffs. To what extent do the imposition of tariffs affect all of the companies that make stuff and do stuff? So we know it doesn't affect the service economy particularly. That's what makes up most of the Western world, service sector. So it doesn't affect that bit. That's 60%. It doesn't necessarily affect some other areas like agriculture, mining, primary stuff. It only really affects manufacturing. In the UK, manufacturing is, what, Rich, 10, 20%? The impact is possibly not as great as the media would like us to believe. And then if you think about your mitigation strategies and all the rest of it, of governments and of companies and of individual buyers and others, then really, how great is the impact? And does it really, really knock? If you see a 10% increase on something you're importing from China because of a tariff, or 20% or 30%, if that's only 1% of the cost of what you're making or what the final sell price is, how big is the impact? So there is a bit of a counter to some of it. And I guess that's where the president of the US is coming from. Some of it won't necessarily hit the sides. It would just create tariff revenue for the US Treasury. So I think there's a lot to think about.
Bringing other foreign economies investing in the US, for example, and building their
bringing it home. Yeah.
Bringing it home.
Bringing it home, so to say, right? Yeah.
I mean, it's great in the medium term, but again, that inward investment will create better products potentially. It will stimulate competition. It will give better local jobs. But the thing to remember is, where's the profit going? Because the profit's probably being extracted back out of the US, back to the home country. And that's what's happened in the UK to a large extent, where the industry that we have got, we don't own any of it. We don't even own our own infrastructure or utilities anymore. So the profit's going back out again, which is, when they talk about the UK economy growing, I don't know how it grows, because there's nobody investing in it anymore.
No, because we're investing in other economies.
Yeah.
So we're investing in the United States.
All the money's going
They're
out.
investing in us, or the Chinese are investing, and vice versa. So that's where the wealth are created. I think the tariff thing will clearly, from a macroeconomic perspective, slow the world down, create inflation, create interest rates to go up, create unemployment, right? That's what all economists would say about the situation. But it looks at the moment like the worst hit economy will be the US. So the dollar has massively depreciated. That's a massive drag on importers, on lots of companies in the US. There's probably as much as the tariffs, because the dollar has fallen in value. Will interest rates go up, therefore, which will make the cost of capital to the US investor greater, which will either encourage them to go and invest somewhere else in the world where they can borrow money more cheaply or get investment money more cheaply, or it will just create inflation in the US home market. So I don't want to be political about it, but from an economic perspective, it does look and feel somewhat like the US is the worst affected.
History will teach us nothing, because that was, we talked about this a couple of episodes ago. The William McKinley tariffs from whatever that was, 1897.
Correct.
They screwed the US economy. And then the 1929 Smoot-Hawley tariffs, they screwed the economy in the US as well and led to the Great Depression. So it's been tried a few times before, and it doesn't generally work very well. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, regardless, there is business professionals, how would I say, being smushed in the middle of this policy, right? I guess the question is how do they deal with it in the short term? Because I think that we all recognize that there is a mid and a long term beyond this. Yeah. And will we even see the end of it? Who knows, right? But what do business professionals do to navigate this in the short term?
Understand where the impact is. Because to my point earlier, it doesn't impact everything. So where is the impact? So where's the analysis to show where an imported good collects a tariff, where does that hurt you? If you understand that, then you think about the mitigations, don't you? So we talked about this earlier, it's a process, but it's about understanding what your risks are, what the impact of the risk is, the likelihood of it impacting you, and then thinking about mitigating action, because it is really complicated. Because if you put a tariff on something and then your currency appreciates in value, the tariff sort of has a lesser effect. What currency you're buying it in and what price you're paying at base level has an effect. So it's thinking about, how do I work that?
I think the key is, and we could probably do a bullet point on this, Ed, couldn't we? This could be bullet point 6. Risk is everywhere. So what you need is a really, really big spreadsheet this time. And as Ed says, you do a risk impact versus probability. You score them, ideally from 1 to 9. I think 1 to 9.
Right. 10 should never be
not 10.
In the liker. No.
I'd go from 1 to 9, multiply them all together, add some weightings, and then you've got a really nice spreadsheet, which will give you a lovely, lovely false sense of security that you've worked it all out.
Particularly if you use color coding in the spreadsheet.
Yes.
Like a red, amber, green.
There has to be a rag.
Amber, green, and then you could have shades in between as well, couldn't you?
Blue as well.
But of course, when it comes to the understanding of the impact, going out and doing something about it, that is, of course, when the agile sourcing, the nice slide, but the actual act of it, of course, and putting it into action, that is, of course, when it would become a potential impact in a business is okay. I see that I have a real risk in this part of the supply chain, and hopefully, like you guys mentioned, it'll be able to be understood beyond tier 1. And you understand, okay, hey, this is going to be the potential place where tariffs are going to be impacted. Then I go and do something about it rather than sitting with it in my spreadsheet, so to say, right?
Yeah.
How do we get beyond the spreadsheets? What's your biggest tip to procurement professionals? How do you go and act, right?
First of all, print the spreadsheet out and hand it out.
Right, exactly.
Physical copies. Physical copies.
Yes.
I think that would be my first bullet point. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Then have some meetings. I think it would be good to have some meetings. You could probably have some meetings by teams initially, and then maybe get a big physical meeting, probably in a capital city somewhere.
Yes,
a nice one
for sure.
Yeah, somewhere
for
nice.
Sure. And just like a sales kickoff, just like a sales kickoff is called a SKO, I think that we should call it a PKO, a procurement kickoff as well. We have to find a good business acronym for it as well. That's also important.
PKO,
but
in Dubai. Let's do that.
Let's call it Cooter. Kick up the arse.
So once that we've printed out things, we've distributed this memo across the business. I mean, seriously, how are we going to make an impact? If you could, give some inspiring words to these procurement professionals for
I would go for
God's sake.
Consultants.
Okay, right.
Just get out there and do something. To Rich's point. Don't look at your spreadsheet. Well, look at your spreadsheet, think, there's a big issue. Go out and do something about it. And then come back to the business and say, I've worked on this, I fixed this. Bring a different insight. Go and talk to your government about how tariffs work and how things are coded. Because that will have an effect. If everything's got a code for international movements, logistics movements. Every item you could send a camera lens to somewhere, and it will have a particular code that it has that when it goes through the whole logistics pipeline and through all the customs points. Challenge it. You're buying stuff. They've just put let's say it was 25% tariff on something. See whether the naming convention is right. See whether you can call it something else. See whether you can get a let for your company. Because that happens. I've done that. I've been involved in that when I was in the electronics industry. Because there were loads of protectionist tariffs for Europe for silicon chips coming in from the Far East and so forth. We had people actively working to get things removed from a tariff because there was no competitive threat to Europe because there was nobody making the product. So there's really simple actions you can take. Obviously, the complicated automotive manufacturing companies, it's going to be beyond my brain to work out how to deal with it. But the simple actions, and I think for a procurement person, is step forward and get out there and do something about it. And the second is talk to people, other procurement professionals, find out what they're doing, learn from them, learn from the internet and all the rest of it. Because I think it's really easy to pontificate and have lots of workshops and sit in your office, you're over town, whatever. Go and do stuff. The people who are successful are the people who step forward, aren't they? And get on and do things, and realise that occasionally you'll make a slip up, but you're going to be recognised for having a go.
And with that, I think that it's great call to action. And I could talk to you guys all day. Get out there and do something. In between the humor and the ability to be able to not take yourselves or the role too seriously, I think that we've also offered our listeners today with some real nuggets of inspiration, education, and opportunity to go and act. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to be able to come and share some of these insights. If our listeners want to be able to learn more about what you guys are doing at Odesma or the Procurement Says No podcast, how do they best get up to speed with a dynamic duo such as Richard Beattie and Ed Cross?
Well, you said that in the wrong order. It's me first, isn't it? No.
It's so we have an Ed for a reason.
Understood.
Go to www.procurementsaysno.com. You will find a wealth of information there, links to all the podcasts, but all the podcasts are on all of the podcast places. They're on Spotify and that. And we're also doing some stupid things on TikTok as well now. So it's all there. It's all in the ether. And if that doesn't work, hire a T3000 and get them to do the action for you. And also, you can buy T-shirts with Procurement Says No on them as well. Ed's got a large... marriage. We'll send you one, Sam.
Merch.
We got merch.
We would love it, and we'll send some merch back to you guys. We'll have a merch exchange, a swag bag exchange.
Is merch exchange subject to tariffs?
Not in Sweden, it's not, but I'm not sure about the UK. Things go on that island that I don't always know about, to be completely honest with you. So you'll have to let me know. We'll check the codes, right, Ed?
Yeah, I said about changing the tariff. Our T-shirts are diapers. They're free of tariffs.
Good. Essential goods. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to be able to be on today's episode. Go and check out Procurement Says No, the podcast. Ed Cross, Richard Beattie, Ed Cross, whichever way you want to say it. Thank you guys. Appreciate your time.
Cheers. Thanks, Sam.
Cheers. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.